Once upon a time, in a small village called Zaman Gari in the northern part of Nigeria, stood a magnificent palace, a beacon of power, wealth, and majesty. The village was ruled by King Abdul, a fearless warlord. Among the many servants who toiled tirelessly in the palace, serving day and night, was Amina. Amina had been taken from her village when it was invaded during a war. Many were killed, and others captured as slaves. Ever since, she had remained in the palace as a slave. Though her heart yearned for freedom, she served faithfully, hoping that one day the chains of her destiny would be broken. Amina's life took a tragic turn the day King Abdul noticed her. Known for his might on the battlefield and his charm in the court, the king had a dark side, a thirst for domination that spared no one. One fateful evening, as the palace buzzed with preparations for the Salah festival, a guard approached Amina with a message. The king had summoned her to his chambers. Fear coiled tightly in her chest as she followed the guard's instructions. She had always avoided the king's gaze, knowing the stories whispered among the servants about his unrestrained power. Her footsteps were hesitant, her heart pounding as she stepped into the opulent room lit by flickering oil lamps. The doors shut behind her, and the guard left, leaving Amina alone with King Abdul. He dismissed formalities, his gaze piercing as he towered over her. "Your Majesty," she stammered, "how can I serve you?" But there was no kindness in his reply. Without warning, he seized her wrist, pulling her closer as she struggled to pull away. Amina's protests were met with cold indifference as the king overpowered her, having his way with her. The weight of his actions crushed her spirit, leaving her broken and voiceless. When it was over, the king cast her aside, his expression devoid of remorse. He pushed Amina out of his chambers, tears streaming down her face as the enormity of what had happened settled upon her. What happened that night changed Amina forever. The king had taken what he wanted, leaving her broken, humiliated, and voiceless. Weeks turned into months, and soon Amina realized she was with child. Panic set in, for she knew the palace laws were unforgiving. A slave bearing the king's child was a threat to the queen's status and an affront to the royal family's honor. Queen Mariam, the king's wife of 8 years, carried a heavy burden. She had not borne the king a child. Her desperation to secure her position made her a ruthless opponent to anyone who threatened her place by the king's side. When whispers of Amina's condition reached the queen's ears, she was overcome with rage and jealousy. A mere slave had succeeded where she had failed. Enlisting the help of the palace elders, Queen Mariam devised a cruel plan to rid herself of Amina and the unborn child. Late one night, as the palace slumbered, Amina was dragged from her quarters by palace guards. "Take her far from here," the queen ordered coldly. "Let her die where no one will find her." The queen further cast a spell on Amina, ensuring she would never deliver the pregnancy and would suffer until her death. Amina was thrown out of the palace gates with nothing but the clothes on her back. Alone and shamed, she wandered into the wilderness, tears streaming down her face as the weight of her situation crushed her spirit. The forest loomed ahead, dark and foreboding, but she had no choice. There was no home to return to, no arms to comfort her. Days turned into weeks as Amina struggled to survive. Rain soaked her fragile frame, and she scavenged for food in rubbish heaps, her strength waning with each passing day. This went on for 2 years. She never found her way out of the forest no matter how hard she tried. One cold night, as the moon hid behind thick clouds, Amina felt the first pangs of labor. Alone in the heart of the forest, she knew her time had come. Thunder roared above as she fell to the ground, clutching her stomach in agony. The winds howled through the trees, nature itself mourning her plight. With no one to help her, Amina faced the unimaginable task of bringing her child into the world on her own. The hours dragged on, each moment filled with unbearable pain and fear. As the storm raged, Amina delivered her first child, a boy, his cries piercing through the night. One after another, 6 more boys followed, their tiny bodies huddled together on the cold forest floor. Exhausted and broken, Amina cradled her newborn sons, tears streaming down her face. She whispered blessings over each child, naming them in her heart though she lacked the strength to speak their names aloud. Amina knew her time was short. Her body was failing, her life slipping away with each passing breath. As the storm began to wane, Amina's eyes closed for the final time. Her lifeless body lay beneath the towering trees, surrounded by the 7 sons she had given life to. The forest fell silent, as if mourning the passing of a soul who had suffered too much. Morning came, and the forest was bathed in golden light. A hunter named Bako, who often roamed the forest of Zuma village to hunt bush meats, stumbled upon the heartbreaking scene. He froze in shock, his eyes falling on the lifeless form of Amina and the 7 crying infants. Bako approached cautiously, his heart heavy with sorrow and confusion. He stood beside the babies, their tiny faces stained with tears. "What kind of fate is this?" he whispered, staring at the tragedy before him. He looked at Amina, her face still bearing traces of her struggle and strength. Bako realized he could not leave the children there, vulnerable to the dangers of the forest. One by one, he lifted the infants into a makeshift cloth sling, his mind racing with thoughts of what to do next. Though he was a hunter, known for his sharp instincts and resilience, this task felt heavier than any he had faced before. He knew the journey ahead would be difficult, but the cries of the children stirred something in his heart. "You were not meant to die here," he said softly, his voice filled with determination. With the 7 boys strapped to his back, Bako set off, leaving Amina's body beneath the shade of the forest. Bako returned home with the 7 babies strapped behind his back, their cries drawing the attention of his friend Jamal, who was sitting by the fire in their small hut. Jamal, also a hunter, was tired of their poor living conditions and had grown bitter about their endless struggles to survive. "What is this, Bako?" Jamal asked, raising an eyebrow as he saw the bundle of crying infants. Bako sighed heavily, lowering the babies to the floor. "I found them in the forest. Their mother was dead. I couldn't leave them to die." Jamal groaned, shaking his head. "Bako, we can barely feed ourselves, and now you bring 7 mouths to feed? What were you thinking?" "They're just babies, Jamal," Bako replied. "They need a chance to live. I thought you'd understand." "And we're starving, Bako." "We have to think about survival," Jamal argued. "You brought them here. If we sell them, we can eat, and they'll go to families that can care for them." Bako hesitated, torn between his conscience and their dire circumstances. Over time, Jamal convinced him that selling the babies was the only realistic option. Together, they traveled to neighboring villages, where they sold the children to different families. Some went to wealthy households, while others were sold to average families. After selling all 7 babies, Bako felt a heavy guilt settle over him, but Jamal dismissed it. "You've done the best you could. Now we can live." Years passed, and the 7 brothers grew up in their separate villages, unaware of their shared lineage. And so, 32 years later, the boys had grown. They were no longer boys but men. They were strong and shared the same unyielding spirit and physical strength. Their names? Aminu, Fuad, Gado, Dauda, Habib, Hamza, and Umar. Despite their different upbringings, they all became warriors. Their unmatched strength and skill had not been seen in any other warriors for generations. It was a time of inter-village wars, where conflicts over land, resources, and revenge were unending. These wars claimed the lives of many village rulers, and this continually changed the direction in which many villages were ruled. Over a period of time as the war progressed, the 7 brothers became kings, ruling over their respective villages, but none knew they were bound by blood. King Amina of Dandali village rose to power after leading his people to victory in a fierce battle against raiders. King Gatto of Kankara village, once a slave, earned his freedom and became a mercenary before overthrowing the village ruler and claiming the throne. King Fuad of Jinyeri village was adopted by a wealthy noble family and trained in combat, eventually leading his people to defend their land from invaders. King Habib of Zuma village grew up in a struggling farming family but used his strength to defend his village, earning their loyalty and becoming their ruler. King Umar of Karamu village became a warlord after years of fighting in neighboring conflicts, gaining power through fear and respect. King Dauda of Tashur village grew up in a blacksmith's household and used his skills to craft weapons, eventually becoming a revered leader in his village. King Hamza of Zaman Gari village was raised by parents who were traitors, but he became a soldier, rising through the ranks and leading his village to victory in war. Ironically, this was his father's throne, which was unknown to him. To the people of Zaman Gari, he was just a warrior that will help them fight their war, they thought, when he ascended the throne. However, the wars between these villages became fiercer than ever before, fueled by old grievances and new ambitions. King Aminu and King Gatto fought over control of fertile farmlands along their shared border. King Fuad and King Dauda clashed over trade routes critical to their village's survival. King Umar waged war against King Hamza, accusing him of harboring fugitives from his village. King Habib sought vengeance against King Aminu for a raid that left several of his people dead. The bloodshed between the villages intensified, with each king leading his warriors into brutal battles. Despite their strength and victories, none of the brothers realized that they were fighting their own kin. As the wars raged on, the people of the villages began to suffer greatly. Crops were burned, homes destroyed, and lives lost. The elders of each village pleaded with their kings to seek peace, but their calls fell on deaf ears. Peace? King Gatto scoffed during a council meeting. Not while my enemies seek to take what is mine. King Fuad, hearing of the destruction wrought by King Dauda's forces, declared there can be no peace while he still breathes. The wars escalated, drawing in alliances and mercenaries, turning the land into a battlefield soaked in blood. Each king fought with a ferocity unmatched, their strength earning them reputations as near mythical warriors. The wars, however, continued, with no sign of an end. On the battlefield, the brothers unknowingly faced one another, their strength evenly matched. Villages burned, people starved, and the land itself seemed to weep under the weight of the conflict. It seemed that peace would never come, that the cycle of war and vengeance would only end with complete destruction. The elders of the 7 villages, weary of the unending bloodshed, could no longer bear to see their people suffer. For decades, they had warned against the wars, but their voices had been drowned out by the clamor of weapons and the pride of kings. Now, seeing their lands ravaged by famine and despair, they resolved to act. They knew they could not allow the new generation to inherit hatred and endless conflict. Among these elders was Bako, now 68 years old, who had once been a renowned hunter. The intensifying wars had forced him to abandon the forests he once roamed freely, and he had devoted his remaining years to being a mediator. He had no idea about the true identity of the children he sold years ago. His friend Jamal, who had once shared in his darkest secrets, had passed away 14 years ago, leaving him with only memories of their shared deeds. "We must bring peace," Bako told the other elders during their secret meeting. "If the kings will not listen to their people's cries, we will make them listen to us." The elders began traveling from village to village, determined to appeal to the king's sense of reason and justice. They carried no weapons, only their words and their belief in unity, as they approached the kings one by one. But their efforts were met with disdain and rejection. King Aminu of Dandali dismissed them with a wave of his hand. Old men should not meddle in the affairs of kings. The wars will end when I stand victorious. King Gatto of Kankara sneered. "You think peace will grow crops or rebuild villages? Only strength will earn respect, not your foolish words." King Fuad of Jinyeri turned them away. "Do not waste my time. I fight to protect my people, and I will not bow to the others." King Dauda of Tashur listened briefly before shaking his head. "The gods favor the strong. The weak must perish for balance to be restored." King Umar of Karamu showed no interest, saying, "Peace is a dream for the idle. My people need victory, not hollow promises." King Hamza of Zaman Gari refused to even grant them an audience, sending his guards to chase the elders away. King Habib of Zuma laughed when the elders approached. "The war has made me powerful. Why should I give that up for the sake of old men's dreams?" Each rejection weighed heavily on the elders, but they refused to give up. "If the kings will not listen to reason, then we must find another way," Bako said after one particularly disheartening meeting. As they walked through the villages, they saw the suffering etched into the faces of their people. Children cried from hunger, the elderly grew weaker by the day, and once thriving marketplaces were ghostly and silent. Even the warriors who fought for the kings began to question their purpose, seeing their families starve while they shed blood for prideful rulers. Bako stood in the center of one such village, surrounded by despair, and made a vow. "If the kings will not end the war for their people, we will find a way to end it for them." The elders began forming a plan, one that would force the kings to confront the consequences of their actions and the truth they had refused to see. They knew it would be dangerous, for the kings were powerful and proud, but they also knew it was the only hope for their land to heal. "This war was born of pride," Bako said. "But perhaps it can end with humility." The elders worked tirelessly, using their wisdom and their remaining strength to lay the groundwork for a future of peace, even if it meant risking their lives. The elders' persistence finally bore fruit after several months of tireless efforts. One by one, the kings grudgingly agreed to attend a gathering in Zaman Gari to discuss ways to address the famine and stop the raiding of farms. While the kings made it clear they were not ready to end the war, this gathering marked the first time all 7 rulers would be in the same place at the same time. The day of the meeting arrived, and the air in Zaman Gari was thick with tension and anticipation. Villagers from all 7 kingdoms gathered to witness the historic event. The kings, dressed in their finest royal attire, sat at a grand circular table, their faces stern and unyielding as they eyed one another. Among the elders in attendance was Bako, who had taken it upon himself to ensure peace would come from this meeting. As the discussions began, Bako's gaze wandered to the kings. His heart skipped a beat as he noticed something unusual. On the left of each king's neck was a small, distinct black scar in the shape of a star, identical in shape and size. A wave of memories crashed over him, the 7 babies he had found in the forest of Zuma village, each marked with the same scar. Overcome with emotion, Bako fell to his knees in the middle of the gathering, tears streaming down his face. "They are brothers," he cried, his voice breaking. "They are brothers. They are all brothers." The crowd erupted into murmurs of confusion and disbelief. Villagers whispered among themselves, wondering if Bako had gone mad. "They are brothers," Bako continued, his voice trembling. "They were born of the same mother." One of the kings, irritated by the outburst, ordered his guards to seize Bako and remove him from the gathering. But before the guards could act, several elders intervened, pleading with the kings to let Bako speak. The kings relented, and Bako, still on his knees, began to tell his story. Through tears, he confessed how, years ago, he had found 7 newborn babies beside the lifeless body of their mother in the forest of Zuma village. "I was poor," Bako said, his voice heavy with regret. "I had no means to care for them. My friend Jamal and I made the terrible decision to sell the babies to different families in neighboring villages." The crowd gasped in shock, and the kings exchanged uneasy glances, their expressions softening. Bako described the mother, a woman of extraordinary beauty, with a strength that had clearly been extinguished too soon. Their mother gave them those marks at birth. Two elderly men from Zaman Gari, seated among the villagers, realizing the description matched Amina, suddenly stood up. "That was Amina," one of them exclaimed, his voice filled with realization. "Yes," the other agreed, his face pale. "She was the slave who got pregnant for King Abdul. She was sent out of the palace when the queen learned of her pregnancy." The revelation sent ripples of shock through the gathering. The 7 kings, hearing the name Amina, began to piece together their shared history. Bako, weeping uncontrollably, said, "I didn't know who she was at the time. All I knew was that the babies bore the same scar, a mark left by their mother." Tension filled the air as Bako finished his confession, and an eerie silence settled over the gathering. The kings, still seated, looked at one another, searching for answers in each other's eyes. Slowly, they began to notice the similarities between them, their stature, their strength, their shared sense of purpose. One by one, the kings rose from their seats. Their expressions softened as the truth dawned on them. They approached one another, their pride giving way to something far more profound. "My brother," King Aminu said softly to King Umar, his voice thick with emotion. "Brother," King Fuad said, stepping forward to embrace King Hamza. Soon, all 7 kings were in each other's arms, their years of animosity melting away as they realized the bond they shared. The villagers watched in awe, many of them moved to tears as the once feared warlords embraced as brothers. "We are brothers," King Gatto said, his voice filled with determination. "And we have allowed our pride to destroy the land our mother gave her life to protect." The kings pledged to end the war immediately, vowing to rebuild their villages and bring peace to their people. Bako, still on his knees, wept as he witnessed the culmination of his lifelong efforts for peace. The villagers erupted into cheers, their joy reverberating across the fields of Zaman Gari. The gathering marked the beginning of a new era, one of unity and collaboration among the 7 villages. Together, the 7 kings led their people in rebuilding their lands, honoring the memory of their mother and the sacrifices she had made. In honor of their mother, Amina, and the sacrifices she made to give them life, the 7 kings came together to create a lasting tribute. They commissioned a grand statue of Amina, depicted carrying her 7 infant sons in her arms, a symbol of her strength, resilience, and unconditional love. The statue, carved from the finest stone, was installed at the center of Zaman Gari village, where the 7 kingdoms converged. Surrounding the statue, a lush garden was planted, symbolizing hope, unity, and the rebirth of their lands after years of war. For the 7 kings, the statue was more than a monument, it was a daily reminder of their shared origins and the bond that could never be broken. They vowed to rule justly, ensuring that no family in their kingdoms would ever endure the pain their mother suffered. Together, they declared Zaman Gari a neutral ground for peace and dialogue, where future generations could gather to resolve conflicts without bloodshed. The statue of Amina, standing tall and proud, became the heart of this newfound unity, a testament to a mother's enduring legacy. In addition, the 7 kings made a historic decision to abolish slavery across their kingdoms. In a unanimous decree, they declared that no man, woman, or child would ever be subjected to the chains of servitude again. They recognized that Amina's tragic fate was a result of a cruel system that dehumanized and destroyed lives. This act of abolition not only honored their mother's memory but also marked a new chapter for their people, ensuring that freedom and dignity would be the foundation of their reigns. This story emphasizes that our origins and shared humanity are stronger than the divisions we create. It shows how selfishness and greed can sow destruction, but love, sacrifice, and the courage to seek reconciliation can build bridges and change the course of history. It teaches that understanding our past can help us break cycles of conflict and create a legacy of unity and hope. If you enjoy this story, please click the like button and share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more interesting stories. Thank you for watching and see you on the next video.